I never meant to snoop through my husband's phone. Trust had always been our foundation, but that changed the moment I saw the notification pop up on his screen while he was in the shower. A message from Claire, written in a peculiar mix of French and English that made my heart skip a beat. My name is Harper, and until that morning I thought I had the perfect marriage. On SC Voigt tonight at the usual spot? J'ai something important to tell you. Don't tell it. They'd had to be me. As a linguist, the code switching between languages caught my attention immediately. It wasn't casual Franglish, it felt deliberate, like they were trying to obscure the meaning from someone. From me. I heard the shower turn off and quickly placed Ethan's phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I'd found it. My hands were trembling as I pretended to fold laundry, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. "Hey, beautiful," Ethan said, emerging from the bathroom with a towel around his waist. Water droplets traced paths down his chest, and for a moment I saw him as I always had, the kind, gentle veterinarian I'd fallen in love with. "Everything okay? You look a bit pale." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Long week of translations." He crossed the room and kissed my forehead, leaving a damp spot that felt like it was burning into my skin. "Don't work too hard. We've got dinner at my parents' tonight, remember?" My stomach clenched. The monthly dinner at the Callahan estate. Another reminder that I'd married into a family that saw me as an outsider. "Of course," I said, watching him get dressed for work. "Will Claire be there?" Pause before his answer was microscopic, but I caught it. "No, why would she be?" "Just asking. She seems to be around a lot lately." Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly as he buttoned his shirt. "She's an old friend, Harper. You know that." An old friend who had been showing up at his clinic with increasing frequency, who texted in code, who wanted to meet him secretly. The weight of unspoken words hung between us like a storm cloud. "I should head out," he said, checking his watch. "Early surgery today. Love you." "Love you too," I replied automatically, the words tasting different now. After he left, I sat on our bed, staring at his side of the closet. The expensive suits his mother insisted he wear, the casual clothes he preferred, all hanging there like normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. My phone buzzed, a text from Lydia, my sister-in-law. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight, dear. Mother wants to discuss the summer house arrangements. Wear something appropriate this time." I deleted the message without responding. Lydia, with her perfect outfits and sharp smiles, never missed a chance to remind me that I didn't quite measure up to Callahan standards. But right now, her usual jabs felt trivial compared to the mystery unfolding on my husband's phone. I pulled out my laptop and opened my translation work, but the words blurred together. Instead, I found myself typing Claire Bennett into social media. Her profile was full of recent photos, charity galas, business meetings, and yes, several casual shots at Ethan's veterinary clinic. In one, they were both laughing, heads close together as they looked at something on his phone. The caption read, "Some secrets are worth keeping. Winking face #old friends #TBD." My finger hovered over the image. The timestamp showed it was posted 3 weeks ago, the same week Ethan started having emergency calls in the evenings. Tonight, while we sat through another tense family dinner, my husband would be keeping secrets with Claire Bennett, and I had to decide what I was going to do about it. Callahan Estate loomed before us like a fortress as Ethan pulled into the circular driveway. I smoothed my dress, a designer piece I'd saved 3 months to buy, hoping it would pass Margaret's inspection. Text message from this morning still burned in my mind, but I forced a smile as Ethan squeezed my hand. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, noticing how his jaw tightened. He always got tense before these dinners. The massive front door swung open before we reached it. Lydia stood there, perfectly coiffed in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "You're late," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "Mother's been asking about you, Ethan." "Traffic," he muttered, but I caught the slight tremor in his voice. The same tremor I'd heard when he denied meeting Claire tonight. The foyer echoed with our footsteps as we followed Lydia to the formal dining room. Margaret Callahan sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, while Thomas studied financial reports even at dinner. "Darling," Margaret said, rising to embrace Ethan. Her eyes swept over me, lingering on my dress. "Harper. Interesting choice of attire. Primebid bakaratort." The dress was perfect, I'd made sure of it. But nothing was ever good enough for Margaret Callahan. "Speaking of choices," Lydia chimed in, taking her seat, "I ran into Claire at the country club today. She mentioned something about the clinic, Ethan." My husband's fork clattered against his plate. "Just some consulting work," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Consulting?" Thomas finally looked up from his papers. "I wasn't aware the clinic needed financial consulting." "It doesn't," Ethan said, but Lydia was already talking over him. "Claire said she's helping with some exciting new developments. Didn't you want to tell everyone about that, brother dear?" The room felt suddenly airless. I watched Ethan's face, seeing the panic flash across it before he composed himself. "It's still in the early stages," he mumbled. "Well, I think it's wonderful," Margaret declared. "Claire has always had such a good head for business. Remember when you two dated in college, Ethan?" My water glass froze halfway to my lips. Dated? Ethan had never mentioned that. "Mother," Ethan warned, but Lydia was grinning like a cat with cream. "Oh, Harper didn't know?" They were quite the couple. "Everyone thought they'd end up together, didn't they, Daddy?" Thomas grunted in agreement, and I felt the room spin slightly. The secret meetings, the coded messages, the consulting work, everything shifted into a new, horrifying perspective. "It was barely 2 months," Ethan said, finally looking at me. "It wasn't serious." "Serious enough that Claire still keeps that photo of you two in Paris," Lydia said innocently. "The one from your graduation trip?" I pushed my plate away, untouched. "Excuse me," I managed, standing up. "I need some air." "Harper, wait!" Ethan started to rise, but Margaret's voice cut through the tension. "Let her go, dear. Some people simply aren't built for family discussions." I fled to the garden, gulping in the cool evening air. Behind me, I heard the French doors open and close. Expecting Ethan, I turned, only to find Lydia approaching with 2 wine glasses. "Peace offering," she said, extending one to me. I took it warily, watching her settle onto a garden bench. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "Claire's always been more our speed. The right background, the right connections. But Ethan chose you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "For now." What's that supposed to mean? Just that things change. People realize their mistakes. Thinking of which, Claire mentioned she's looking at properties in our neighborhood. Isn't that interesting? My grip tightened on the wine glass. "Why are you telling me this?" Lydia stood, brushing invisible dust from her dress. "Consider it a friendly warning. Some battles aren't worth fighting, Harper. Especially when you've already lost." She left me there, holding a glass of wine I wouldn't drink, while somewhere across town my husband was meeting the woman he'd never told me about. The woman his family clearly wished he'd married instead of me. I pulled out my phone and opened Claire's social media again. There it was, the Paris photo Lydia mentioned, buried in her old posts. Ethan and Claire, young and laughing, the Eiffel Tower behind them. The caption read, "Some memories never fade. Red heart." My hands stopped shaking as a cold clarity settled over me. If they wanted a battle, they'd get one. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I followed my husband to work. Ethan's emergency call the previous night had stretched until midnight, and when he finally came home, he smelled of expensive perfume and guilt. I parked across from his veterinary clinic, watching the morning unfold through my windshield. The familiar parade of patients, dogs pulling at leashes, cats in carriers, the occasional exotic pet. But at 10:30, a sleek Mercedes pulled into the staff parking lot. Claire stepped out, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly mortgage payment. My phone buzzed, a text from Lydia. Thought you might want to know Claire's meeting with our family accountant today. Something about clinic investments. I switched off my phone and slipped into the clinic through the side entrance, nodding to the receptionist who knew me as Dr. Callahan's wife. The break room connected to Ethan's office through a thin wall, and voices carried if you knew where to listen. The paperwork's ready, Claire was saying. Once you sign, everything changes. I don't know about this anymore. Ethan's voice was strained. Harper doesn't understand our world, Ethan. She never will. Your parents see that, why can't you? A pause. My heart hammered against my ribs. It's not that simple, Ethan said finally. She's my wife, and I'm the one who's been here all along, the one who knows what you really want. Claire's voice softened. Remember Paris? How simple things were then. That was different. We were different. Were we? Or did you just settle for less because it was easier than fighting for what you really wanted? I'd heard enough. I pushed away from the wall, but my elbow caught a stack of files. They crashed to the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet clinic. The office door flew open. Ethan stood there, face pale. Behind him, Claire looked more annoyed than surprised. Harper, Ethan started, but I was already moving. Don't. My voice came out steady, surprising even me. Just don't. This isn't what you think, Claire said, stepping forward. We're discussing business investments. The clinic needs what? Your money? Your connections? Or just you? Harper, please! Ethan reached for my arm, but I jerked away. When were you going to tell me about the buyout? The words were a shot in the dark, but Claire's slight flinch told me I'd hit something. That's what this is about, isn't it? The paperwork, the meetings, the secrets? It's a business opportunity, Claire said smoothly. The clinic could be so much more with proper backing. Ethan knows that. And I'm just in the way? I turned to my husband. Is that why you've been lying? Meeting her in secret, hiding your past? I wanted to protect you, he said weakly. From what? The truth? That your family's finally found a way to get what they want. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. A way to replace me with someone more suitable? That's not, Ethan started, but his phone chimed. Another message. I watched his face as he read it, saw the color drain away. What is it? Claire asked, moving closer to him than any business partner should. Mother, he whispered. She's calling an emergency family meeting. Tonight. Claire's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile. Perfect timing. We can announce the partnership then. Partnership, I repeated. The word tasted like ashes. Is that what we're calling it? I turned to leave, but Claire's voice stopped me. Harper, the clinic's future isn't personal. It's just business. I looked back at them, the golden couple from the Paris photo, standing in an office that suddenly felt like it had never been mine to share. Everything's personal with the Callahans, I said. But don't worry. I'm done playing by their rules. I walked out of the clinic, my mind already racing with possibilities. If they wanted to play hardball, fine. I had languages, codes, and secrets of my own. And unlike Claire, I had nothing left to lose. Behind me, I heard Ethan call my name, but I didn't stop. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. They can only be avenged. I ended up at my parents' small townhouse, the only place I could think clearly anymore. Mom was grading papers at the kitchen table, her reading glasses poached on her nose, while Dad tended to his beloved orchids in the window. The familiar scene made my throat tight. I think my marriage is over, I said, dropping into a chair. Mom set down her red pen. Dad turned from his plants. Neither seemed surprised. We saw the clinic's financial records, Dad said quietly. They're public, sweetheart. Claire Bennett's company filed paperwork last week. Of course they had checked. Two retired professors who taught me to always verify sources, to look beyond the surface meaning. I should have done the same with my marriage. The emergency family meeting is tonight, I said, staring at the worn kitchen table where I'd done my homework for years. They're going to announce the buyout. And probably more. What are you going to do? Mom asked, her academics mind already analyzing the problem. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meeting moved to Le Jardin restaurant. 7 p.m. Dress appropriately. Margaret. Le Jardin. The same restaurant where Ethan had proposed 3 years ago. The cruelty wasn't lost on me. I'm going to fight, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. But I need your help. Dad pulled a folder from his briefcase. We thought you might say that. Remember my friend in corporate law? He spread out documents across the table. Financial records, property deeds, and something that made my heart stop, incorporation papers for the clinic dated 5 years ago, before I'd even met Ethan. Claire's name is on everything, I whispered, scanning the papers. She's been involved from the beginning. There's more, Mom said gently. Check the witnesses' signatures. There it was in elegant script, Lydia Callahan. She'd known everything, had probably orchestrated it all, feeding information to Margaret while playing the concerned sister. My phone buzzed again. Ethan, where are you? We need to talk before tonight. I ignored it, focusing on the documents. The clinic's in trouble, isn't it? These numbers. Dad nodded. It's been operating at a loss for months. Claire's company has been keeping it afloat with loans. Loans that come due next week, Mom added. The timing of this partnership isn't coincidental. Another text, this time from Lydia. Wear black tonight. Suits the occasion. Face blowing a kiss. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need to go home and change. If they want a show tonight, I'll give them one. Harper, Mom called as I reached the door. Remember what I taught you about translations? I paused. That the true meaning isn't always in the words themselves? She smiled sadly. Sometimes the story we think we're reading isn't the one being told. At home, I found Ethan waiting. He looked terrible, his usual confidence replaced by something closer to desperation. I can explain everything, he started. Can you explain Paris? I interrupted. Or the incorporation papers. Or how your clinic's been secretly owned by Claire's company since before we met. He flinched. How did you? It doesn't matter. What matters is tonight. Are you going to tell them you're choosing me, or should I not bother showing up? Harper, please. Clinic is everything to me. Without Claire's help, you might have had to stand up to your family years ago. I moved past him toward our bedroom. The meeting's at Le Jardin now. Your mother's idea, I assume. His silence was answer enough. I pulled out the dress I'd been saving for our anniversary, deep red, not the black Lydia suggested. One last question, Ethan. That night you proposed at Le Jardin, was that your idea? Or was that orchestrated too? He couldn't meet my eyes. I'll pick you up at 6:30. Don't bother, I said, laying out the dress. Il mi aiutare. I have a stop to make first. As he left, I opened my laptop and pulled up the translation project I'd been working on. Legal documents, as it happened. I might not have Claire's money or Lydia's social connections, but I had something they didn't, the ability to read between the lines. And tonight, every single truth was coming out. Le Jardin's crystal chandeliers cast a deceptively warm glow over the private dining room. I arrived 15 minutes early, my red dress a deliberate rebellion against Lydia's black dress directive. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. Madame Callahan, your party is... It's still Winslow, I corrected, scanning the room. Empty, except for one person, Claire, wearing a perfectly tailored black dress, examining a document at the head of the table. She looked up, unsurprised. Harper, Early as usual. Interesting choice of venue, I said, taking the seat opposite her. Was this where you and Ethan planned everything? Back when you first invested in his clinic. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped the document. You've done your homework, but you're missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. Like what? The part where you've been manipulating him for years? Or how Lydia helped you do it? Claire's laugh was surprisingly genuine. You think I'm the villain here? Sweetheart, I'm just cleaning up Lydia's mess. As usual. Before I could respond, the door opened. Lydia swept in, followed by Margaret and Thomas. Then trailed behind, looking trapped. Harper, Margaret's voice could have frozen champagne. That dress is bold. Like your choice of restaurant? I smiled, noting how Lydia positioned herself between Ethan and me. Actually, Claire stood, I chose the venue. For symmetry. Thomas cleared his throat. Let's get to business. The papers are ready. Almost. Claire pulled out a folder. Just waiting on one signature. Harper's. The room went silent. Ethan's head snapped up. What? Lydia's voice cracked slightly. She has no part in this. Actually, she does. Claire slid a document across the table. The clinic's original incorporation papers list both Callahan siblings as beneficiaries. Ethan and Lydia. My hands remained folded in my lap. But Lydia sold her share. To you, Harper. Through a shell company 3 months ago. Claire's smile was razor sharp. She was desperate for cash after her last failed business venture. She didn't read the fine print. Lydia's face drained of color. That's impossible. I never. The transfer documents are in French, I cut in, finally understanding. A language you claim to speak but actually can't. Unlike me. Margaret's hand gripped her wine glass too tightly. This is absurd. But Thomas was already reviewing the papers, his businessman's eyes catching what his daughter had missed. It's legal, he said quietly. Harper owns 40% of the clinic. Without her signature, there can be no buyout. Ethan stared at me, then at his sister. Lydia, what did you do? What she always does, I said, standing. She overplayed her hand. Those late-night calls you thought were between Ethan and Claire? They were Lydia, begging Claire to cover her gambling debts. You little, Lydia lunged forward, but Claire caught her arm. Enough, Claire snapped. This ends now. Harper, name your price. I pulled out my own document. Already done. Full ownership of the clinic transfers to Ethan. Alone. No family interference, no outside investors. And in return? Thomas asked. I walk away. From everything. The marriage, the family, all of it. I met Ethan's devastated gaze. It's what you wanted, isn't it? Freedom from having to choose? Harper, please, he started, but Margaret cut him off. Done. Thomas, call the lawyers. Not done, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. One more condition. Tell them, Claire. Tell them what really happened in Paris. Claire's composure cracked just slightly. That's not relevant. I stood, gathering my things. Everything's relevant when you're rewriting history. You have until midnight to decide. Oh, and Lydia? I paused at the door. Black really isn't your color. I walked out of Le Jardin into the cool night air, leaving behind a room full of carefully constructed lies beginning to unravel. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves. I smiled, hailing a cab. The night wasn't over yet. The midnight deadline came and went. I sat in my parents' guest room, surrounded by documents and translations, when my laptop pinged with an email from Claire. Just 3 words. Check the news. Breaking news headlines screamed across my screen. Callahan Veterinary Clinic under investigation. Below that, Financial irregularities force immediate closure. My phone exploded with notifications. Missed calls from Ethan. Texts from Lydia, all caps and rage. A formal message from Thomas's lawyer requesting an urgent meeting. They called my bluff and raised the stakes. Now dozens of employees would lose their jobs, and countless animals would lose their care provider. All because I'd pushed too hard. I grabbed my keys, but my mother blocked the doorway. "Where are you going?" "To fix this." My voice cracked. "I never wanted to destroy everything." She took my keys. "That's exactly what they're counting on. Your guilt, your decency." A new text lit up my phone from Claire. "Meeting. Your office. Now." I worked as a translator for an international law firm downtown. At 1 a.m., the building was desert quiet, but the lights in my office were on. Claire sat at my desk, looking perfectly composed despite the hour. "Quite a mess you've made," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Me? You're the ones who shut down an essential business out of spite." "No, Harper. We shut it down because we found evidence of embezzlement." She slid a file across the desk. "In your name." My hand shook as I opened it. Transfer records, all technically legal, all tied to my ownership stake. All fabricated. "This is impossible." "I never." "Of course you didn't. But Lydia did. Using your credentials, your passwords, your identity." Claire's smile was almost sympathetic. "She's been planning this for months, waiting for you to make your move." The room spun slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" "'Cause unlike the others, I actually care about Ethan. And that clinic." She leaned forward. "Sign over your shares, take the fall for the financial irregularities, and everything goes back to normal. The clinic reopens, no charges filed." "And if I don't?" "Then tomorrow, Margaret releases evidence that you've been stealing from the clinic for years. Ethan's reputation stays clean, but yours?" She shrugged. "Well, good luck finding work as a translator with a fraud conviction." My phone buzzed again. "Ethan, please, Harper. Whatever they're offering, take it. I can't watch you go to prison." "He knows about this?" My voice sounded distant, even to myself. "He knows enough." Claire stood. "You have 1 hour. Sign the papers, take the deal, or face the consequences." After she left, I sat in my dark office, staring at the city lights below. Everything I'd done to protect myself, to fight back, had only given them more ammunition. My mother's words echoed. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves. But what if they destroyed me first? My computer hummed to life as I logged into my work server. Years of translations, contracts, and documents scrolled past, including, buried in a folder from 3 years ago, the original Paris documents I'd translated for Claire's company. The ones that had started everything. I'd never read them carefully before. Had never needed to. But now, my hands flew across the keyboard, pulling up file after file. French contracts, German amendments, Italian addendums. A pattern emerged, one that made my breath catch. A new email arrived from Lydia. 1 hour left, dear sister. Tick-tock. I looked at the papers Claire wanted me to sign, then back at my screen. The truth that had been hiding in plain sight for years, wrapped in layers of languages and lies. My phone rang. Ethan again. This time, I answered. "Don't sign anything," he said immediately. "Harper, I remember Paris now. All of it. And I know what Claire." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at the documents, then at my computer screen with its web of international transactions and hidden truths. They'd pushed me to my lowest point, thinking I'd break. Instead, they'd pushed me right where I needed to be, at the bottom, with nowhere to go but up. And up meant burning everything down. Callahan family gathered in Thomas's study, exactly where I knew they'd be. Margaret perched on the leather sofa, Lydia paced by the window, and Claire stood near Thomas's desk, all of them waiting for me to sign away everything. I walked in wearing the same red dress from Le Jardin, but this time carrying a thick folder. "You're late," Lydia snapped. "Where's Ethan?" "Probably still trying to get his phone working again," I said, watching Claire's expression flicker. Interesting timing for his service to cut out, right after he mentioned Paris. Thomas cleared his throat. "The papers, Harper. Your hour is up." I placed my folder on his desk. "You're right. It is." I pulled out a stack of documents, the original translations I'd done years ago before I even met Ethan. "Let's talk about what really happened in Paris." Claire stepped forward. "That's not relevant." "It's all relevant." I spread out the papers. "These contracts, written in French, German, and Italian, detail how Claire's company systematically stripped assets from failing veterinary clinics across Europe. Buy them out, gut them, sell off the pieces." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Business is business. Except these clinics weren't failing naturally. They were sabotaged by someone who created false financial records, just like the ones you're trying to pin on me now." Lydia's pacing stopped. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can, 'cause I was the one who translated the documents. I just never knew what they were for. Until now." I turned to Thomas. "Did you know Claire's company is under investigation in 3 countries? That's why she needs the clinic, to hide money before the authorities freeze her assets." "Enough. Claire reste composure craquée. Sign the papers or go to jail. Those are your options." "No," Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He looked disheveled but determined. "Those aren't her options." "Ethan," Margaret started, but he cut her off. "I remember Paris now, Claire. You didn't just break my heart, you stole my original business plan. The one I showed you the night before you disappeared." He moved to stand beside me. "The plan Harper found in your company's files, written in my handwriting, dated 3 years before you claimed it was yours." Claire's face went white. "That's not de truth," I finished. "Like how you've been using Lydia's gambling debts to manipulate her. Or how you convinced Margaret that I was trying to ruin the family name when you were the one destroying it." "I did what I had to do," Claire said, her voice hard. "This family needed saving from people like you." "No," Thomas spoke finally, studying the documents on his desk. "We needed saving from people like you." He pressed a button on his phone. "Send them in." The study door opened again. 2 serious-looking men in suits entered, showing federal badges. "Miss Bennett," one said, "we'd like to ask you some questions about your company's international holdings." Everything happened quickly after that. Claire's arrest, Lydia's breakdown, confessing everything, Margaret's shocked silence as her perfect world crumbled. Through it all, Ethan held my hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered as we watched the agents lead Claire away. "I should have seen it sooner. Should have stood up to them." "We both should have seen a lot of things," I said, squeezing his hand. "But we see each other now." Thomas approached us, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "The clinic," he said gruffly. "It needs to reopen. People depend on it." He held out a pen. "Sign these." The real ones this time. Papers transferred full ownership to Ethan and me. No strings, no hidden clauses. "Why?" I asked. "Because sometimes," he glanced at Margaret, still sitting shell-shocked on the sofa, "family isn't about control. It's about trust." He turned to Ethan. "Something I forgot a long time ago." Lydia stood alone by the window, watching Claire's car disappear down the driveway. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, taking the pen from Thomas, "we rebuild. All of us." I signed the papers, then offered the pen to her. "Starting with the truth." She took it with trembling fingers, and as she signed, I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes, hope. Outside, the sun was rising over the Callahan estate. A new day, a new beginning. Not everything was fixed, but at least now we were facing it together. And that was a truth worth fighting for. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated clinic, watching Ethan perform surgery through the observation window. His hands moved with confident precision, healing a German shepherd that had been hit by a car. The dog's owner, a young girl, waited anxiously in reception, just as I had waited through my own storm of uncertainty. Clinic had changed. We'd kept the Callahan name but reimagined everything else. The walls now displayed framed translations of healing words from different languages: courage, hope, renewal. A reminder of how we'd found our way back. "He's good at putting things back together," Lydia said, appearing beside me. She looked different now, softer somehow, without the sharp edges of desperate ambition. Weekly therapy and a gambling addiction program had helped. "So are you," I replied, noting the stack of account books in her arms. She'd insisted on working here, doing honest books this time, paying her debt to the family one balanced ledger at a time. The surgery light clicked off. Success. My phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Dinner tonight? I found your mother's recipe for coq au vin." These new Friday dinners were different from the old ones. No more power plays or hidden agendas, just careful steps toward understanding. Thomas had retired, letting Ethan run the clinic his own way. Margaret was learning to love without controlling, though old habits died hard. Mail came, Lydia said, handing me an envelope. The return address was a federal prison. Claire's letter was short. "I never meant for it to go so far. Paris was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful, not the start of a lie. Maybe that's what happens when we try to force life into the shape we think it should be, instead of letting it be what it is. Take care of him. Take care of all of them." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket, next to the ultrasound picture I hadn't shown anyone yet. Some revelations needed perfect timing. Ethan emerged from surgery, still in his scrubs. "The dog will be fine," he said, wrapping an arm around me. "Just needed someone to believe in him. Like father, like future child?" I whispered. His hand froze on my waist. "Are you?" I nodded, watching joy spread across his face, pure and untainted by anyone else's expectations. Lydia squealed and hugged us both, then quickly composed herself. "I'll reschedule your afternoon appointments," she said, wiping her eyes as she hurried away. Later that night, as we walked home to our new house, modest but ours, Ethan stopped suddenly. "I found something in the old clinic files," he said. "A letter from my father to his father, written when Dad was my age. He wanted to be a teacher, did you know that? But his father convinced him that business was the only acceptable path." "Is that why he let you keep the clinic?" "I think he finally realized that legacy isn't about controlling the future. It's about giving it room to grow." We reached our front door, but I paused before going in. The moon hung full and bright, like the night I'd found that first text message in French. Everything had changed since then, and nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Choosing this life over the one they planned for you?" Ethan touched my still flat stomach, his answer in the gentleness of his hands. "I chose love," he said simply. "Everything else just fell into place." Inside, I had translations waiting, honest work for honest pay. Tomorrow we'd have dinner with both our families, all the sharp edges slowly smoothing into something new and real. And in 7 months we'd add another chapter to our story. My mother had been right about revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, but about building something so beautiful that their shadows can't touch it. I hung my red dress in the back of the closet. I wouldn't need it anymore, but I'd keep it, a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for your happy ending, even if the battle leaves a few scars. Some things, after all, are worth the price of admission.